We're taught that law is the bedrock of civilization, a monument to human reason. That's a nice story. The reality is that for most of history, the law was an absolute circus of baffling, idiotic, and downright insane rules. From legally mandated sticky pants to a state-run war on coffee, we're about to explore 48 historical laws so dumb, you'll wonder how humanity ever managed to survive itself. This isn't just a list. It's a tour through the legislative madhouse of our ancestors. 1. A 13th century English law, the Assize of Arms, made archery practice a mandatory weekend activity. Every able-bodied man from 15 to 60 was legally required to own and train with a longbow every Sunday. This wasn't a suggestion for a fun hobby. It was a nationwide military readiness program designed to keep a standing army of expert archers ready to fight the French. It was the government legally canceling your Sunday brunch plans for national security. 2. According to the historian Herodotus, ancient Egyptian pyramid builders were legally required to eat a daily ration of garlic and onions. This wasn't a culinary choice. It was history's first large-scale corporate wellness program. The state needed to prevent disease from wiping out its massive workforce. It was the ancient equivalent of your boss forcing you to attend a mindfulness seminar, except the seminar was a fistful of raw garlic, and your job was building an eternal monument to a living god. 3. In 13th century Florence, a city so obsessed with its own image that it bordered on parody, it was illegal to have a picnic on the steps of a church. This wasn't about piety or respecting holy ground, it was about aesthetics. The city's elite simply hated the sight of commoners and their lunches cluttering up the perfect architectural views. So they didn't pass a law against littering, they passed a law against the act of eating itself. It was the ultimate act of civic vanity, a city that made being hungry in public a crime. 4. Long before modern cable news, the 17th century Puritans in Massachusetts waged the original war on Christmas. From 1659 to 1681, it was illegal to celebrate. Any public display of holiday cheer, from singing carols to simply taking the day off work, would earn you a hefty fine. They saw the holiday as a decadent pagan mess. For 22 years in America, the phrase "Merry Christmas" was basically illegal contraband. 5. The 12 Tables of ancient Rome contained specific regulations for grieving. One law expressly forbade women from wailing loudly or scratching their cheeks at funerals. This wasn't a call for stoicism, it was a cynical political move. The Roman elite believed that over-the-top mourning was just a political power play, a way for powerful families to show off how many devoted followers they had. They passed a law against performative grief. 6. In the ancient Greek city of Thebes, being an artist was a legally mandated nightmare. A law required public art to be a perfect, idealized version of its subject. If your art was judged to be worse than the real thing, you were fined. But here's the genius part. If your art was judged to be better than the real thing, you were also fined for setting an impossible standard. The only way to win was not to play. It was legally enforced artistic mediocrity. 7. In 14th century France, the law applied to all creatures great and small. This wasn't some kangaroo court. Animals could be arrested, assigned a defense attorney, and formally tried in real courts. The most famous case involved a pig convicted of causing a death. It was sentenced to public execution, but not before being dressed in a full suit of human clothes for the occasion. The court records even include the expense report for the pig's outfit. 8. Medieval Scotland's answer to the lack of plumbing was a law of grotesque civility. Since everyone threw their waste out the window, the law required you to first shout, "Gardy Lou," a warning to pedestrians below. The law didn't ban the practice, it just established a legally recognized warning shot. It was the legal difference between being a public nuisance and committing assault with a biological weapon. 9. When Oliver Cromwell's Puritan regime took over England, they declared a legal war on fun. A law was passed that shut down every single theater in the country, banning all plays as hotbeds of sin and distraction from God. It was the 17th century equivalent of a nationwide internet outage ordered by a guy who hated memes. And it lasted for 18 years. 10. For a time in medieval Germany, a married couple could legally settle a deep-seated dispute via an officially sanctioned trial by combat. But the rules were gloriously unhinged, designed with a bizarre concept of fairness. The husband was placed in a waist-deep hole with one arm tied behind his back, limiting his mobility and power. His wife, however, was free to roam around the edge of the pit, armed with a cloth sack containing several heavy rocks. It remains the only judicial proceeding in human history that feels like it was meticulously designed by Wile E. Coyote. 11. Iceland has a naming system that basically laughs in the face of family legacies. Instead of a surname passed down for generations, your last name is a one-generation-only label. It's created from your father's first name plus son for a boy, or daughter for a daughter. So if a guy named Jan has a son and daughter, they become Janssen and Jan's daughter. Your last name isn't your history. It's a temporary tag that just says property of John. 12. Ancient Scotland had a brilliant solution for dealing with non-weaponized bar fights. The crime of clamhew was defined as striking someone hard enough to draw blood with your bare hands. The punishment wasn't jail time, it was an invoice. The fine was scaled to your social status, meaning the richer you were, the pricier the punch. It was, quite literally, a luxury tax on punching people. 13. For nearly a century in America, it was literally illegal to be ugly in public. Starting in Chicago in 1881, so-called ugly laws made it a crime for anyone diseased, maimed, or in any way deformed to appear in public spaces. The entire point was to spare able-bodied citizens from feeling uncomfortable. The law didn't just punish people for their appearance, it legally codified the idea that your comfort was more important than another person's right to exist in public. 14. The 15th century Republic of Venice ran its intelligence agency, the Council of Ten, like a deadly corporation. Official records show they had a formal, budgeted process for political assassination by poison. They didn't just approve hits. They maintained a detailed price list for poisoning different targets, from foreign generals to the Holy Roman Emperor. It was state-sponsored murder, run with the cold, itemized efficiency of a modern consulting firm. 15. The Aztec Empire enforced class division with brutal fashion laws. It was illegal for a commoner to wear clothing made from soft cotton, a fabric reserved exclusively for the nobility. If you were from the lower classes, you wore rough agave fiber, and that was that. Getting caught wearing cotton wasn't punished with a fine or a warning. The punishment was immediate execution. It's a chilling reminder that, for most of history, fashion wasn't a statement. It was a life-or-death proposition. 16. In medieval England, the ale conner was a legally mandated government job responsible for quality control on beer. Their method was elegantly bizarre. They would pour a splash of new ale onto a wooden bench, then sit in it wearing leather pants. If their pants stuck to the bench when they stood up, it meant the brewer used too much sugar. This wasn't a party trick. It was a consumer protection law enforced by a man whose primary job qualification was a sticky butt. 17. In 1518, in Strasbourg, a woman began dancing uncontrollably in the street. Within a month, 400 others had joined the dancing plague. City leaders consulted the era's top physicians and reached a stunning conclusion. The cure for the plague of uncontrollable dancing was to make them dance even harder. They built a stage, cleared out halls, and hired musicians, legally prescribing more dancing. It remains history's only known case of a government trying to solve an epidemic by actively encouraging it. 18. In the United Kingdom, it is technically illegal to die in the Houses of Parliament. This isn't rooted in some ancient superstition, it's a masterpiece of bureaucratic self-preservation. Anyone who dies within the palace is legally entitled to a full state funeral. To avoid the logistical and financial nightmare of this, the government simply outlawed dying on the premises. It's a clever law to avoid a paperwork headache, which, of course, raises the ultimate question. What exactly is the punishment for breaking it? 19. The Philippines has a law that weaponizes the legal system against gossip. The crime of intriguing against honor essentially makes it a punishable offense to spread rumors or stories that could damage a person's reputation. It's the state's official tool to shut down the rumor mill. It's probably the only country in the world where the phrase, "Hey, did you hear about," could be immediately followed up with, "Yo, your court summons?" 20. The crime of jaywalking wasn't created to protect you. It was invented in the 1920s by the auto industry to sell cars. Before then, streets belonged to pedestrians. But as cars started killing people, the car lobby waged a massive propaganda campaign to shift the blame. They shamed pedestrians, lobbied for laws, and effectively redefined streets as places for cars only. So when you wait for the walk signal, you're not just following a law, you're obeying one of the most successful corporate marketing campaigns of all time. 21. The Greek lawgiver Zaleucus believed in brutally literal justice. When his own son was convicted of adultery, a crime punishable by being blinded in both eyes, Zaleucus faced an impossible choice. Instead of breaking his law or fully enforcing it, he created a grim compromise: one eye from his son and one from himself. The law's demand for 2 eyes was satisfied, but in the most shocking legal workaround imaginable. 22. In 1696, England introduced the window tax, a property tax based on the number of windows a house had. The government assumed more windows meant more wealth. The public responded with predictable logic. They started bricking up their windows to dodge the tax. This plunged homes across the country into darkness and poor ventilation, which was promptly blamed for a surge in disease. It was a perfect, self-defeating cycle of bad policy, a masterclass in how to literally tax sunlight and fresh air. 23. Ancient Athens had a law that made family gatherings profoundly awkward. If a man died without a son, his daughter was legally compelled to marry his closest male relative, often her own uncle. This wasn't about love. It was a cold economic transaction to keep property within the family line. The daughter was less a person and more a human conduit for an inheritance, a living key that unlocked the estate for the next man in charge. It was an arranged marriage meets a corporate merger. 24. Since the reign of Napoleon Bonaparte, a French law has made it illegal to name your pig Napoleon. This was enacted purely to protect the emperor's ego from being associated with a barnyard animal. While nobody's enforcing it today, the law has never actually been repealed. This means, technically, deep within the French legal code, the dignity of a long-dead emperor is still being defended from the theoretical insult of a well-named pig. 25. In ancient Rome, the law of patria potestas granted the head of a family absolute life-or-death power over his children, a concept that is terrifying to the modern mind. This power was so extreme that it included the legal right to sell his own son into slavery. But here's the bizarre, almost comical twist in the legal code. If a son was sold and managed to gain his freedom, he would return to his father's control. A father could only do this twice. The law stated that after being sold for a third time, the son was finally, legally free from his father's authority forever. It was a monstrous system of ownership, but it came with a built-in 3 strikes and you're out clause for paternal tyranny. 26. Wisconsin takes its Dairyland title with terrifying seriousness. A state law makes it illegal for a public restaurant to serve you margarine as a butter substitute, unless you explicitly ask for it. But the true masterpiece of dairy legislation is the requirement that all butter be judged by a state-licensed butter grader. Somewhere in Wisconsin, there is a person whose entire professional, solemn duty is to be the state-sanctioned guardian of your toast's integrity. 27. Ancient Athens practiced a form of political hygiene called ostracism. Once a year, citizens could vote to exile any public figure for 10 years. No trial or charges necessary. All you had to do was be too powerful, too ambitious, or just really, really annoying. If 6,000 people wrote your name on a shard of pottery, you were gone. It was history's first and most brutal cancel culture, where getting unfriended meant being literally kicked out of the country. 28. In Tudor England, the government got deeply involved in men's fashion. Specifically, a law was passed to regulate the size of a man's codpiece. As the padded crotch accessory became a bigger and bigger status symbol, Parliament stepped in to limit how much stuffing could be used. This was the 16th century equivalent of passing a law against putting fake spoiler wings on a Honda Civic. It was the state's official attempt to legislate against obnoxious flexing. 29. The story of King Canute ordering the tide to stop isn't about a deluded king. It's about a genius political strategist. Annoyed by court sycophants who claimed he was all-powerful, Canute had his throne placed on a beach and publicly commanded the waves to halt. When he was inevitably soaked, he turned to his court and brilliantly demonstrated the limits of his power. He didn't just win an argument, he used the unshakable laws of physics as his star witness. 30. In ancient Rome, wearing the color purple could get you killed. A specific shade, Tyrian purple, was legally reserved for the emperor alone. The dye was fantastically expensive, made from the crushed glands of thousands of sea snails, and became the ultimate symbol of power. To wear a fully purple toga was an act of treason, a silent declaration that you were challenging the throne. It's the ultimate power move, not just owning land or armies, but owning an entire color. 31. The Spartans had a marriage ritual that was less a wedding and more a tactical operation. A groom had to ritually abduct his bride. She would then have her head shaved, be dressed in men's clothes, and left in a dark room. The groom would sneak in, consummate the marriage, and then immediately sneak back to his military barracks to sleep. This bizarre, clandestine routine was legally required to continue for years. In Sparta, saying "I do" meant saying "Roger that." 32. The 12 Tables of Roman law included one of history's most savage debt collection rules. If a debtor couldn't pay back multiple creditors, the law stated that the debtor's body could theoretically be divided among them in proportion to the debt. Historians debate whether this was ever meant literally, but the fact that such wording existed in an official legal code is mind-boggling. It makes even the nastiest modern debt collectors look downright friendly. 33. In 1516, Bavaria passed the Reinheitsgebot, or the beer purity law, stating that beer could only contain water, barley, and hops. It's praised as an early consumer protection law, but its real genius was economic. By legally forbidding brewers from using wheat, the law guaranteed that the grain would be used for bread, effectively preventing food shortages and price hikes. It was a brilliant piece of social engineering that used a law about beer to solve a potential famine. Peak German efficiency. 34. Under Old English common law, there was a grotesque principle known as the rule of thumb. It allowed a husband to physically discipline his wife as long as the stick he used was no thicker than his thumb. This wasn't just a brutal custom, it was an attempt to give violence a legal measurement, as if regulating the width of a stick somehow made the act acceptable. It's a chilling reminder that some of history's worst ideas wore the disguise of law and order. 35. A grim English maritime law known as the Law of Wreck created a perverse lottery on the coastline. If a ship wrecked and everyone died, the cargo went to the local lord. But if a single person, or even just a cat, survived and made it to shore, the cargo belonged to its original owner. This law created a powerful financial incentive for coastal communities to be, let's say, less than helpful to struggling survivors. Every shipwreck became a cruel game of hide-and-seek with life-or-death stakes. 36. The Puritans in 17th century America had very specific rules for church. Many colonies passed laws forbidding the chewing of tobacco inside. But here's the brilliant loophole. The act of chewing wasn't always the crime. The crime was spitting on the floor. In fact, some churches had designated spitting corners for the congregation. It proves that even the most pious authoritarians understood a fundamental truth. You don't stop a man's vices, you just create a bureaucracy to manage them. 37. Anglo-Saxon England enforced justice through a system of mandatory snitching called frankpledge. Communities were organized into 10 household groups. If someone in your group committed a crime, the other 9 of you were legally required to drag him to court. If you failed, the entire group was hit with a massive fine. It was the historical equivalent of a legally enforced group chat, where if one guy messes up, everyone else has to pay for it. 38. For 900 years, the English town of Dunmow has hosted a trial where a couple can win a side of bacon. To win the Dunmow flitch, they must convince a jury they've lived for a year and a day in perfect harmony, without a single argument. If they succeed, they're celebrated as heroes and awarded the pork. It's a beautiful testament to love, but also the most profoundly English concept imaginable. The highest achievable award for marital perfection is a cured meat product. 39. History's first copyright ruling came from 6th century Ireland, and it was pure poetry. A saint secretly copied a rare book owned by his former teacher. The teacher found out and demanded the copy. The case went to the High King, who delivered a simple, devastatingly elegant verdict. To every cow her calf, and to every book its copy. He ruled that the illegal copy belonged to the owner of the original, establishing intellectual property law 1,000 years before anyone had even heard of a printing press. 40. Proposing a new law in the ancient Greek city of Lokri was the ultimate high-stakes pitch meeting. The rules required you to make your case to the public assembly with a rope around your neck. If your proposed law was rejected, an executioner standing by would immediately hang you. It wasn't just about discouraging bad ideas. It was about ensuring you were willing to die for your good ones. It's history's most brutal filter for legislative spam. 41. For centuries in the Belgian city of Ypres, the annual Festival of the Cats had a shockingly cruel tradition. The city jester would climb the bell tower and drop cats from above as part of a ritual meant to banish evil spirits. The practice finally ended in 1817, and today they throw plush toys instead. A massive improvement. Still, it makes you wonder what other ideas were being pitched at those medieval town meetings. 42. In British-ruled India, the government tried to solve Delhi's cobra problem by offering a bounty for dead snakes. At first, it worked. Then, clever locals started breeding cobras just to kill them for the bounty. When the government figured out the scam and canceled the program, the breeders released their now worthless snakes. The result? Delhi's cobra population was higher than ever. This is now famously known as the cobra effect, the perfect historical example of a solution making a problem infinitely worse. 43. In the 16th century, England's King Henry VIII got so obsessed with control that he introduced a beard tax. It was a graduated tax based on your social status. The more important you were, the more you paid for the privilege of having facial hair. The law wasn't really about money. It was a tool to enforce social hierarchy. A daily reminder from the state that even the hair growing on your face was subject to government approval and regulation. 44. If you think fashion police are a modern invention, 14th century England had them enshrined in law. King Edward III passed laws regulating the length of the pointy tips on your shoes. A commoner's shoe points could be no longer than 6 inches. A nobleman's could be up to 2 feet long, requiring them to be chained to the knee just to walk. It was an enforced fashion arms race, where your social status was measured by how ridiculously impractical your footwear was. 45. The 17th century Ottoman Sultan Murad IV didn't just dislike coffee, he declared all-out war on it. Believing coffee houses bred political rebellion, he outlawed the drink entirely. The punishment for a first offense was a severe beating. A second offense meant being sealed inside a leather sack and cast into the Bosphorus. It remains one of history's most extreme anti-caffeine policies. 46. The 12 Tables of Roman law had a very clear stance on free speech. They were terrified of it. The law specified that writing a satirical or insulting poem about another person was a capital crime. Offenders could be executed with clubs, all because of a well-aimed punchline. It was the ultimate version of state-enforced cancel culture, where a sharp tongue could literally cost you your life. 47. The 13th century Welsh laws of Hywel Dda contained a detailed price list for the value of a cat. A kitten before it could see was worth a penny. Once it caught its first mouse, its value quadrupled to 4 pence. And if you killed a cat that protected a village granary, the fine was a full-grown ewe, complete with its lamb and wool. It's definitive legal proof that even 800 years ago, society understood a fundamental rule. You do not mess with cats. 48. For centuries, English law fought a strange battle against corporate immortality through a rule called mortmain, or dead hand. The law prevented people from leaving their land to entities like the church in their wills. The government feared that because a corporation can't die, the land would be locked in its dead hand forever, never re-entering the market or paying taxes to the crown. It was a legal war against the concept of a corporate ghost holding onto property from beyond the grave. So, human stupidity is a constant. But even in a circus of madness, there's always a main event. Out of all 48 laws we covered, which one stands out to you as the absolute undisputed champion of dumb? I want to see the debate in the comments. And if you enjoy questioning the sanity of civilization, you've found your channel. A subscription is the only logical verdict.